as we've all seen, Donald Trump's immigration policy has been a complete and utter disaster. He has failed over and over again, and he has proven to his base that building that border wall will not be paid for by Mexico, and it wasn't even a priority of his when he had some political capital. Now, what's been frustrating is that no one in the mainstream media is calling it what it is, until Cenk Uygur was allowed on cable news, and he called Trump out. Take a look.
Why do we have this problem in the first place? Because Trump said he was going to stop the flow of migration, and instead, what did he do? It's gone up 32% in the last month, and it's the most we've had, both legal and illegal, in 13 years. So Kayleigh, I put it to you, isn't Donald Trump a giant failure on his signature issue?
No, he's not a giant failure. And first, I want to correct your fallacy that he puts kids in cages. A lot of those pictures were from the Obama administration, so nice try doesn't work. We have a crisis on our hands. Do you acknowledge that at least, Cenk, that we have a crisis when you have 1 million people
Kayleigh,
set to come in this fiscal year,
you know,
more than the population of Miami and Atlanta?
So the statistics that she mentioned at the very end were false. And she also lied about the photos featuring kids in cages. Those photos were taken by journalists after Donald Trump implemented his zero tolerance policy. We all know that, but she's Donald Trump's campaign manager. So of course she's gonna go out there and put complete and utter nonsense. Actually, press secretary for Trump's re-election campaign. Let me be clear about what she does. Anyway, what do you guys think about that whole exchange?
I mean, it's a lot for them to handle, truth telling. And so what do they respond with? It's usually more lies and more lies. Not only did she lie about the photos, there was one revelation that there were images that were taken that resurfaced in the news that are sometimes used as B-roll photos from the children that were trapped during Obama era. Yeah, that happened a little bit, but most of those photos, as you were talking about, did come from journalists going to the border in Texas, in other places along the southern border doing their job. And we can see them here. They're also being hit by tear gas, which is a violation of Geneva Convention standards in war, not even just a civilian population, but in war. So there are so many tragedies that are going on besides him failing on his signature policy, where people who I'm not a fan of, but people who are part of the Republican base like Ann Coulter have broken ranks with him because she's so disappointed about his failure to follow through with the wall, to stymie migration as well.
Right, and in fact, if you're concerned about US taxpayer money going toward undocumented immigrants, the policies that Trump has implemented actually drains more of our resources because he has this policy of ensuring that everyone is detained rather than allowing people to maybe wear ankle bracelets and get released until they get their court date. And I'm specifically, of course, referring to individuals who are here seeking asylum. So I want to get your thoughts on the next video, Nando, because McEnany continues on with this notion that Trump has actually been awesome on immigration policy.
Under Obama, we had less undocumented immigrants than we do under Trump. Trump said, I'm gonna get tough and I'm such a tough guy and I'm gonna separate the families. I'm gonna put the kids in this place and the parents and the moms in the other place. I'm so tough. And what do we have? We have more undocumented immigrants, not less. It's a 13-year record. He's a miserable failure on this issue. If they voted for him thinking he was gonna stop undocumented immigrants, he didn't even do that. And now we have an absolute disaster on our hands because he doesn't know how to address the core issue. Why are they coming in the first place?
We have seen a steady incline in illegal immigration starting under the Obama administration and continuing to now. The only person who has taken any interest in stopping this in the last 4 decades is President Trump, who secured money for 450 million miles of the wall. Excuse me, 450. Excuse me, did it work? It's going to work. It's going to be built, the 450 miles by the end of next year. We've just got the funding for this. What have you done?
Zero chance it's built by next year.
I just, I love the, Trump is freaking out and trying to strong arm Mexico into somehow preventing migrants from leaving. I mean, because I remember the biggest criticism people had of the Cuban regime and the Castro regime was that they wouldn't let people leave their country and come into the United States. But when it's Central Americans, we want them to build these sort of police states to keep their people in. And Cenk asks the absolute correct question, which is why are they coming in the first place?
Yes.
It has nothing to do with border enforcement clearly, because as the border has gotten more militarized and more violent, people keep coming. It just goes to show just how desperate their situation must be in Central America, especially in Honduras, which is the country that is driving the majority of the migrants through Mexico into the United States in the last year or two. A country that we supported a military coup in 2009. The party that's been in power on the back of the military coup is privatizing all social services, including education, pensions, all that fun stuff. There's huge protests throughout Honduras as a result, and the social crisis caused by that is what's driving all these people to come over here. So this is like the same story over and over and over again. We screw up a region, and then the people want to come over because they're desperate and poor and fleeing violence, and then we shut the doors. So it's just,
it's like if you break your leg and you're in excruciating pain and you're just taking painkillers, but you're not dealing with what the problem is, which is your broken leg.
Yeah, and then you're getting addicted to oxy, and then you're dying.
Exactly. So and we take this approach on pretty much every single issue, including domestic policy. For instance, when it comes to the issue of homelessness, all right, we can go ahead and build shelters. But why are all these people homeless? What's causing the homelessness? Could it be stagnant wages? Could it be the fact that wages haven't kept up with inflation? Could it be that developers are demolishing affordable housing to build these luxury apartments and condos? Let's talk about the root of the problem, but we never do that. We only talk about what can we do to alleviate some of the symptoms.
Well, because people are obsessed with the simplified narrative of what's actually happening. So the narrative that the conservatives are trying to funnel out is that there's so much migration into the US that they're taking American jobs, and that's why there are depressed wages, that's why the middle class is bottoming out. But there's so much that is very complex about migratory patterns that are not incorporated into this conversation. Yes, there's an increase right now in terms of migration stemming into the US from other places in Central America, but Business Insider just a week ago reported that there's actually more Mexicans from the US migrating back to Mexico.
Oh, let me just tell you, okay? This is something that I've been trying to, I've been yelling from the rooftops about. In fact, on CNN, the one and only time I was allowed on reliable sources. Yeah, there is actually more Mexican immigrants leaving the United States than coming in. And as Nando pointed out, the majority of the migration is coming from these Central American countries that are fleeing violence. These are people who are desperate, so desperate that they're willing to risk their own lives, not just through the journey, but through the brutality that people are now experiencing at the border, at the hands of our immigration, our border patrol agents. Now, with that said, I want to go to the final video, and I love what Cenk brings up here. Take a look.
Just last week, we had a 6-month-old child who was taken across the Rio Grande River by a 55-year-old man who was not her father. Why? Because we have the TVPRA, which incentivizes crossing with a child because you are allowed to stay in this country.
That is a rule change that should be addressed.
Of course it should.
No,
we must have a wall.
Kayleigh,
do you care about the 70,000 Americans who die of drug overdose, much of which crosses our southern border?
First of all, on the drug overdoses, it's largely OxyContin and heroin that's causing it. Those are the giant drug companies giving Donald Trump tons of money to pretend that it's Mexicans that are the problem when it's people in suits who pay off Republican Party one day after another, and they make billions of dollars off of OxyContin, and you know that. And Trump said he was gonna stop it, and that was another lie. He didn't do that either, okay? And in terms of the kids coming from Guatemala, etc., do you think about those parents, how desperate they have to be to put those kids on that perilous track? And they do it anyway because the conditions are such deplorable situation. And part of the reason for that is our stupid drug war that created total chaos in those Latin American countries. And that's a complete and utter failure. That's also on you.
All right.
I love how they pretend, and I'm specifically referring to McEnany here, that they care about the violence that they might face, the migrants might face at the hands of smugglers. You don't care. I mean, we have Border Patrol agents who literally go out there and they destroy, humanitarian efforts to leave food and water for these migrants so they don't die as they're trying to flee violence in their countries and find safety here in the United States. I mean, you really care about what the smugglers are doing? First of all, I mean, I genuinely do care, which is why it's important to have a better system put in place so these people, first of all, again, root of the problem, why are they fleeing and what can we as Americans do to help, solve that problem? And secondly, if you care about these people's lives, why are you putting them in cages? Why are you ripping the kids away from their parents with the zero tolerance policy, which Trump had to abandon because it was so controversial? I mean, they don't care about these people's lives, and I'm so fed up with the disingenuous, but what about these kids? What about these people? You don't care about these people. And I love that Cenk brought up the issue of drugs, because that is another talking point that we see from the Trump administration over and over again. Oh, the drug smuggling, the drug smuggling. We have the drug smugglers here in the United States, and as Cenk says, they wear suits.
Yeah, ending the war on drugs tomorrow would be the best way to curb, unauthorized immigration from Central America into the United States, right? The demand for drugs in the United States has remained stagnant despite the efforts of the drug war. Drugs are purer, more cheap than ever before, despite the efforts of the United States drug war. All it's done is create violence and misery in the countries that are in the root of the drug smugglers. So that only creates more conditions for migrants to come. It doesn't address the problem of drugs. Drugs are just, I don't know, you want drugs? I can get you drugs today. It's not that hard. It hasn't changed one bit. The only thing it's caused is all kinds of death, misery, and violence in Central America, which is leading to the migrant crisis we face now.
Yeah, and the other thing that they're pretending about is that they care about people who are dying from drugs, right? They care when it enters white suburban households. That's when they care.
They don't even really
a little
care.
bit, yeah,
a little bit to elevate it to a national emergency and to find alternative paths that don't include law enforcement, which was a stark divergence from the Nixon administration calling it a war on drugs very intentionally to seize and attack the Black community and to seize and attack anybody outside, including Central America, but also got kicked up with the Reagan administration as well. And we know the disastrous effects, and we know the way that the media was also complicit in elevating that narrative. And so they don't care, and they're a part of it. And I love that Cenk pointed out that it is the guys from Big Pharma who are price gouging you all just so that they can have more expensive drugs to line their pockets, and people get addicted, and they look for cheaper sources that are more dangerous and not monitored by doctors.
And just going back to the root of the problem and how we tend to only try to fix things by alleviating symptoms. Look, we're already creating a new root of the problem, and it is our inaction with climate change. What is the United States gonna? What is the United States gonna do? What is the government gonna do when people are displaced? Massive amounts of people are gonna be displaced from their homes because the conditions in their countries will be unlivable because of what we're doing with climate change, or our inaction, I should say, with climate change. So that's gonna be a huge issue, and the Trump administration is certainly contributing to that issue.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.